Interesting story today, folks, in the LA Times regarding the death of Matthew Perry. We remember on October 28th of last year, Perry was found dead outside of his home, actually in the hot tub. And the autopsy's since been done, and the cause of death was, I guess, the scientific term, acute ketamine intoxication. The reality is he died as a result of too much ketamine in his system. So, first thing is, what is ketamine? It's a Schedule III drug, meaning it is a legal drug for doctors to prescribe in this country. Now, the general use of it, it's a short-acting injectable anesthetic drug. It's usually used in a hospital setting, in an operating room setting. But in this country right now, about 20% or one in five of all the prescriptions for drugs written are what is known as off-label prescriptions. That's mean it's being written for a use that's not been approved by the FDA. So you think, how can that be? How can a doctor write a prescription for a drug to be used in a manner not consistent with what the FDA approved? What FDA is approving is what the drug can be advertised for, and is it safe for the treatment that it's being advertised for. But then a doctor can take that drug and he can really go, quote, off label, and he can prescribe it for a different indication. He's just not allowed to advertise the drug for that use, but he can definitely prescribe it for something that it's not FDA approved for. We're seeing that a lot with ketamine right now in treatment of depression. Now, there's a nasal spray that either has ketamine in it or it's a close, I don't know, analog, or it's chemically close to what ketamine is. That's being used as a short-acting drug to treat depression, and that is approved for that by the FDA. But as far as like intravenous use of it to address depression, that's something that's not been approved by the FDA. But again, it is happening. So, how much did Perry have in his system? I mean, we can just look at the coroner's report. The coroner said it was similar. The amount in his system was similar or consistent with an amount that would be used in a operating room setting or using it as an anesthetic in a hospital setting. Now, today in the LA Times, there was a report that there is a criminal investigation into Matthew Perry's death. Now, we know the death was caused by ketamine. That means that that criminal investigation is focusing on where that ketamine came from. It can only come from two different, I should say, there's two different supply chains where that drug could come from. The illicit side, street dealers, social media dealers, the same places that people are getting meth, cocaine, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in that case, what would be very significant is interviews with people close to Perry, looking at Perry's phone, seeing what history, text messaging, social media app history there was, perhaps phone calls there were that may have shown a pattern of setting up deals, perhaps for ketamine, acquiring ketamine. Or there's the whole protected supply chain or legal supply chain. In other words, were there or was there a doctor or more than one doctor prescribing ketamine to Mr. Perry? And if there were, the investigation gets a lot more complex, because not only do you have to show that that ketamine that was prescribed caused the death, you have to show that that prescription was written outside of medical necessity, meaning that there was really no medical need for that prescription, that the doctor wrote a prescription for someone and knew, or that drug was intended to be used recreationally or in some manner not consistent with how it's generally used in the medical field. Hey, this is going to be an interesting one. These cases take a long time. Generally, if it does turn out to be a medical professional that wrote prescriptions or a prescription, there's a lot of expert review that has to happen. Medical files are reviewed by experts to see if the doctor's actions were consistent with best practices and were within the scope, as I said, of medical necessity. Was that prescription needed? Was it normal that somebody presenting those indications would get that prescription? Was there appropriate follow-up and monitoring? Hey, don't forget the case 15 years ago. Dr. Conrad Murray provided Michael Jackson with a prescription drug, propofol, that caused Michael Jackson's death. And Dr. Conrad Murray was eventually charged with manslaughter and convicted of manslaughter. Now, The reporting today stated that LAPD was working with the United States Postal Inspection Service, and the DEA. What tools do those federal agencies bring to the table? The primary one is the criminal charge, drug distribution resulting in death. Even if the drugs came from a medical professional, there have been doctors charged with this in the past and they've been convicted or pled guilty. Even if that ketamine came from a medical professional, if it caused Matthew Perry's death, and if it can be shown that that prescription was written outside the scope of medical necessity, that doctor can be criminally liable and could be charged with a significant federal crime that carries with it a 20-year minimum mandatory sentence. So stay tuned, folks. Let's see where this investigation goes.